Rinse takes your laundry and hand-delivers it to your door, expertly cleaned and folded. So you could take the time once spent folding and sorting and waiting to finally pursue a whole new version of you. Like Tea Time You. Or this Tea Time You. Or even this Tea Time You.
Said you hear about Dave?
Or even Tea Time You.
So update on Dave.
It's up to you. We'll take the laundry. Rinse. It's time to be great.
When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
Before last week, if you logged onto Facebook, you might have seen a group called ICE Sighting Chicagoland. It had about 80,000 members. People used the group to identify immigration agents or to warn their neighbors that an ICE raid might be coming. Then, at the request of the Trump administration, Facebook suspended the group.
Well, we have some insight into that from a public comment that Pam Bondi made, in which she said that the administration had reached out to Facebook and that in response to outreach from the administration, Facebook had taken down the group. So that seems to be what happened to it.
That's Renee DiResta. She's an associate research professor at Georgetown who studies online manipulation and abuse. What did you think when you saw that from Pam Bondi?
Well, I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was interesting because it's not abnormal for the government to communicate with tech platforms. We can talk about the long history of that happening. But this particular administration has reframed any government communication with the tech platforms as an egregious act of censorship.
The idea that the Biden administration was censoring tech platforms is a consistent refrain from President Trump and his party.
No longer will our government label the speech of our own citizens as misinformation or disinformation, which are the favorite words of censors and those who wish to stop the free exchange of ideas and, frankly, progress.
And so it was kind of remarkable to see that very public statement by Ms. Bondi and to see that very public declaration, particularly since it came with very little transparent evidence to justify the administration's outreach. If I think it had come with something that said, we reached out because of clear incitement to violence, we reached out because of clear calls to action, we reached out because of direct threats to our officers and explicit doxing, then I think there would have been something where the public might have felt like these were requests that were made because of specific threats to violence that were happening within those groups. But we didn't see that. Instead, we just saw this this sort of very basic acknowledgement that had happened, presented almost as a sort of brag.
It was hard not to say, wait a minute, isn't that what you guys railed against for years?
And so it was sort of remarkable to see all of a sudden this acknowledgement that they were, in fact, speaking with platforms, making specific moderation and takedown requests, and that the platforms were complying.
Today on the show, the content moderation wars are back. Is the Trump administration pressuring platforms to take down legal speech? I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks makes it easy to find the perfect gifts and holiday looks that suit your personal style. The holidays can be a lot of things: exciting, relaxing, heartwarming, and yes, sometimes even a little stressful. That's why you need Saks.com. Saks makes holiday shopping easy, stress-free, and most importantly, fun. Whether it's for yourself, your family and friends, or even the pickiest person on your list. You can feel confident going into this holiday season, knowing that Saks is there to help you find inspiration, curate a holiday wish list, pick out gifts for your loved ones, and have a look ready for whatever might come your way. Whether it's an office holiday party, a cozy night in, or a vacation getaway, Saks has everything you need. If you're looking for shopping to be personalized and easy this holiday season, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to shop for everyone on your list. I wanted to talk to Renee because she has been deep in the trenches of the content moderation fights of the last decade. She worked at the Stanford Internet Observatory, and during the 2020 election, she was part of a group of researchers who tracked misinformation.
We thought we were going to see a lot of stuff from Russia, Iran, and China, but it turned out that most of these claims came from the president of the United States, who at the time was Donald Trump, and his inner circle and the influencers that surrounded him.
She and her team flagged posts and brought them to the attention of the platforms.
And the platforms ignored about 65% of those around 4,000 or so URLs that we sent during this 6-month period. And the rest of the time, they primarily labeled them.
That work made Renee a target of the right, both online, where she sometimes got called CIA Renee, and in Congress, once Representative Jim Jordan became chairman of the House Judiciary Committee.
Jim Jordan reframed this project as like a cabal launched by the Department of Homeland Security, which it was not. And by the way, the Department of Homeland Security at the time was run by Trump appointees. But nonetheless, he turned this into some Biden censorship regime, despite the fact that the government was run by Trump, and turned me specifically into this CIA figure because I had interned for the agency 20 years prior. But they needed to come up with some sort of government nexus to turn us into a censorship regime so that they could make the argument that some government actor was sending these election-related tweets to the platform so that they could make the argument that we had been agents of the government when we were doing this study. They took a number from our final report where after the election, we had gone and looked at all of the numbers of tweets and the most viral stories that everybody knew about, things like Dominion voting machines secretly changing votes, that wrong rumor, or Sharpie markers in Arizona secretly being used to invalidate Trump voter ballots. And when we added up the number of tweets of these crazy, wild viral stories, the number of tweets was 22 million. And Jim Jordan took that number and he said that we had censored 22 million tweets. And they went on this sort of, this goose chase trying to find evidence of this cabal that had purportedly gone and demanded the censorship of conservative Americans. And that was the narrative that they put out there. And then they made this argument that any outreach was done with the intent to censor, and that any moderation action, including, as I mentioned, just putting a label on a tweet, was censorship. And so this complete expansion and redefinition, that was sort of what they turned content moderation into, this mass redefinition, this mass censorship complex. So it was kind of remarkable and wild to see them just go out there and say, yeah, we didn't like these ICE groups, so we requested that platforms take them down.
We're going to get into some of the flashpoints in detail, but I think it's important to set out when governments, the U.S. government, first starts having contact with the social media giants about what is being posted on their platforms. And what's the government asking of these platforms?
So the government has spoken with platforms for a very long time because, again, the government has its own speech rights. The government has its own right to persuade. And the problem is when it rises to the level of coercion. So if you think back to the days of ISIS, for example, right? There's a period of time when people begin to realize, the Obama administration's in power at the time. The Obama administration begins to realize that terrorists are using social media companies to recruit. And this is a problem, right? Because I don't know how clearly you remember that time, but there are situations where people go and declare allegiance to ISIS, and then they go and drive vans into crowds, right?
Yeah.
There's the San Bernardino, there's a mass shooting, there's situations like this. This is having profound real world impacts. And so if you go back and you read news articles from the time in 2015, 2016 timeframe, or even a little bit before that, you'll see administration officials saying, we acknowledge the freedom of expression. We acknowledge that these are platforms where people are expressing themselves. But at the same time, what do we do about the terrorist exploitation of the information domain, right? Is there some sort of, and the way that they phrase it, is there some sort of social pact that we can come up with that says, hey, this is unacceptable to us. This is just not something that we're going to allow. And so you see them referencing this in the form of persuasion. Now they're saying it publicly, right? The administration officials are sitting on stage at these talks where this is coming up. And they're saying like, hey, the social media platforms, like it really would be great if they did more to disrupt the terrorist recruiting that is happening on their platforms. And gradually, as things like the Bataclan attack happen, you also see media reporting that the Attorney General, it was Loretta Lynch at the time, that FBI Director Comey are going to the Valley, and they're sitting down and they're meeting with executives from Apple, from Facebook, from Twitter to try to figure out, is there some sort of agreement by which the platforms feel compelled to think differently about allowing terrorists to recruit people on their platforms. And they're not out there saying, if you don't do this, then we will revoke, for example, your CDA 230 protection.
That protection, more commonly known as Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, says companies aren't liable for the content that third parties post on their platforms. If that went away, it would be a huge legal mess for the tech companies.
They're not framing it in a tit-for-tat way or in an explicitly coercive way. You see them framing it in a. But this is essentially persuasion. This is the government using its speech rights to say, "Hey, this is a real challenge. Like, is there some way that we can get there on this?" What you see when Trump comes to power, you see a little bit of a different tactic. So Trump has a really interesting, a very acrimonious relationship with the platforms because they begin to moderate him.
Right.
Yes. And so there is a situation that happens in May of 2020. This is again leading into the election, where he says some things about mail-in ballots that are wrong, and Twitter labels them, right? And again, you can still see the tweets. They haven't come down. They're, in my opinion, a label is counter speech, right? This is the platform putting up more information.
You say one thing, I say something else.
Exactly.
Nobody's rights are being infringed.
And again, the platform has First Amendment rights. The platform can say, hey, I'm hosting your speech, I'm carrying your speech. Also, I'm going to speak back. Here's my label, right? And so Twitter puts these labels on it. And in retaliation, Trump issues an executive order called the Preventing Online Censorship Act, which seeks to increase federal regulations of platforms who, he claims, engage in selective censorship against conservatives. That's how he frames this. And he says in this Preventing Online Censorship Act that he wants to have executive branch departments review federal spending on platforms. He wants to limit their CDA 230 liability protections. So literally they moderate him, and the next day he drops this thing. And this is where a whole bunch of First Amendment lawyers, begin to write, hey, this is actually coercion. This is a retaliatory act, a retaliatory executive order by the President of the United States in response to a private company executing its own free speech rights, its own right to moderate on its platform. And then there was another very, very funny Trump moment, and I don't know what words I'm allowed to say on your program.
Go for
it. Chrissy Teigen writes a tweet. She gets into a little bit of a fight. Trump says something insulting about her husband and her, and Trump does not tag her. And she responds to him, calling him, quote, this is a direct quote, a pussy-ass bitch. And the White House calls Twitter privately behind the scenes and wants it to come down, asks that they take it down because it was a derogatory statement directed at the president. So here again, you have a platform, a platform where they're receiving inbound a request to take down a user's speech, and the request is coming from an executive branch official, and Twitter refuses. They deny the request. The request stays up. There's no clear coercion there, but this is again these are the sorts of requests that you will see behind the scenes from a government agency reaching out to a platform.
That practice most famously came to a head during the COVID pandemic, when the Biden administration contacted social media companies about posts referencing COVID.
What you see from the White House is them saying things like, Biden says at one point, they're killing people, right?
Right, referring to Facebook.
Now, he walks that back a couple days later, but you do see in some of these court cases, you do see the conversations that happen internally to Meta, where they're trying to figure out how to stay on the right side of the White House. And this is the argument that you see made, which is, where is that line? Where is the line between coercion, right, where the White House says something and they feel like they have to change a policy or do something significantly different, versus the White House, or in this case, the president, exercising his free speech rights, exercising his right to speak persuasively, to say they're killing people. Where is that line? In some cases, the White House does specifically mention individual people. Alex Berenson is one such case, and that's where you see private lawsuits brought by Berenson and others where they allege that they have been specifically targeted by the administration. Their specific speech rights have been infringed upon because the White House is trying to get their speech actioned by a private actor, in this case, trying to make Twitter or Facebook moderate them specifically. So that's the sort of, kind of complex history of how platforms and governments engage.
When we come back, Jimmy Kimmel enters the chat. Shape the future of enterprise AI with Agency. AGNTCY. Now an open-source Linux Foundation project, Agency is leading the way in establishing trusted identity and access management for the Internet of Agents. The Internet of Agents is the collaboration layer that ensures AI agents can securely discover, connect, and work across any framework. With Agency, your organization gains open, standardized tools and seamless integration, including robust identity management to identify, authenticate, and interact across any platform. Join industry leaders like Cisco, Dell Technologies, Google Cloud, Oracle, Red Hat, and more than 75 supporting companies to set the standard for secure, scalable AI infrastructure. Empower your company to deploy multi-agent systems with confidence. Is your enterprise ready for the future of agentic AI? Visit agency.org to explore use cases now. That's agnTCY.org.
Have you ever wondered about the digital infrastructure that powers today's biggest tech trends? Interconnected, a new video and podcast series from Equinix, offers a rare look at the technology driving the innovations of tomorrow, from the edge compute and cloud systems to ultra-reliable networks and everything in between. Through candid conversations with industry experts and visionary thinkers, Interconnected's hosts guide you through emerging megatrends in tech, the infrastructure making them possible, and the connected future they're shaping. They dive deep into the systems behind AI, automation, quantum, and beyond. The first episode of Interconnected covers the AI renaissance in the medical field. Join the discussion on how society would not be on the verge of an AI-assisted medical renaissance without the near-instantaneous network of interconnected data systems. Discover the digital infrastructure powering today's biggest tech trends with Interconnected. Follow Interconnected on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, With the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Let's talk about this concept of jawboning. Will Duffield wrote in a paper for the Cato Institute, it's the use of official speech to inappropriately compel private action. And so much seems to turn on that word inappropriately. Like, what is saying, hey, we're all being decent here, and what is saying, like, well, you also have some merger information that might be coming in front of the government sometime soon. Like, what's appropriate and what's not?
That is the question. And that is really where, in cases like the Murthy case, there was no clear evidence offered that there was a retaliatory action on the table.
The case Renee is referring to is Murthy v. Missouri. It was brought by Missouri's attorney general, who claimed that the Biden White House had pressured social media companies to censor conservative speech. It became a rallying cry for conservatives, though the case was essentially tossed out at the Supreme Court.
The Murthy case never even really got to that point because the plaintiffs who brought it had no standing.
Right. It was thrown out at the Supreme Court for lack of standing. And Amy Coney Barrett basically said, there's no concrete link here between the restrictions that were alleged and the conduct of government officials.
Oh, she went a lot further than that. I think it's important to note. One thing that was fantastic about the Amy Coney Barrett opinion is she did what the district court and the Fifth Circuit failed to do. The Attorney General of Missouri, who is now the senator from Missouri, Senator Schmidt, they forum shopped for a judge who just waved everything right through. And Amy Coney Barrett went back and looked at the evidentiary record and said, hey, some of these emails in which, you have the Biden administration saying mean things have absolutely nothing to do with content moderation. She kind of laid out that the record was, in her words, quote, clearly erroneous. So she really laid out there that this case had been elevated, that it was remarkable that it had even made it to the Supreme Court because it should have been tossed much earlier, and that several of the plaintiffs, including Jay Bhattacharya, who's now the head of the NIH, had never been so much as mentioned by the government defendants. So it wasn't even that there was no standing, in some sort of lofty connecting the dots standpoint. It was that there had been no requests made, period. So it was sort of a remarkable case in just how bad it was. There were other cases that were that came up during the same kind of series of cases that the court considered. There was one, NRA versus Vullo, where there were many more transparent, veiled threats that were made of regulatory scrutiny. If you don't sever links with the NRA, we will do this, right? In which you see financial institutions dropping NRA-affiliated businesses after receiving those signals. So that causality is like much clearer. And so this is where that in the case of social media companies, or in the case of the example I gave with Donald Trump putting out that anti-censorship, preventing online censorship executive order, that was immediately after and in retaliation for an action he did not like.
So now here we are. We started by talking about the Justice Department telling Meta, take down this Facebook group. But then we've also seen Apple and Google remove the Ice Block apps from their respective app stores, which did similar things. Would you call that jawboning? Would you call it something else? Like, what name do we put on that?
Well, there's the combination of, again, do they make a persuasive case that this puts agents in danger, and do they have something to back that up? I think where we need to be, the best way to handle things like this is transparency. And that's what we don't have, right? There's no way for me to feel comfortable making a statement that this was justified and that was not justified, because I don't see what they see, right? And so I think where we come down is, what is the mechanism for having some kind of transparency that would increase the confidence that the government is not targeting the speech of its political enemies? So there are things like, there's a bill, the SMART Act, the Social Media Administrative Reporting Transparency Act, that I actually like a lot, which requires would require, I should say, government officials in the executive branch to disclose their communications about protected speech or association with social media platforms. Meaning, if they were to reach out to a social media platform about some sort of user speech or about a policy, then they would have to disclose that. The other mechanism in the interim, because, not a whole lot passes here in the United States these days,
Right.
would be that platforms could also disclose transparently, right? So they do that to some extent. You can see copyright takedown requests are often publicized through what's known as the Lumen database, where if a media company tries to get a video taken down for copyright reasons, you can go and you can see that. I think that is the sort of thing that lets the public feel that they have an understanding of what their government is requesting. And I think that that's actually quite valuable. And I say this as somebody, again, who, got sucked into one of these cabal theories.
Yeah.
Because the government was not secretly requesting takedowns through me.
So from your point of view, just put it all out there, then you are not CIA, Renee.
I mean, I think that it's actually quite important that, we wouldn't have done something so unethical as accepting secret cabal takedown requests. And again, just to be clear, all of our communication with the government, we turned over to Jim Jordan,
Right.
under subpoena. So if such requests had come in, I have no doubt that Jim Jordan would have been absolutely thrilled to make, to put that on the front page of whatever media outlet he could have gotten it run on, But this is the point, though, right? Which is, I really, really believe in transparency, and I really believe that that it should be a universal American principle. This is not a partisan thing to say that you should not want the government trying to have your speech moderated, surreptitiously by coercing a social media platform into doing it. I think that there are many, many legitimate critiques of the moderation policies of social media platforms. I have made them myself for the better part of a decade, but I think that those are the sorts of things that we should be making ourselves as citizens, ourselves as users, ourselves as, in my case, people who work in tech policy. But I don't think it's the business of the government to insert itself into content moderation policy decisions.
This isn't a direct analogy because it's a TV network, not a tech platform. But in terms of where Americans are, the American public is on this issue, I think when we look at the aftermath of Brendan Carr, the FCC chair, publicly threatening to pull TV licenses after Jimmy Kimmel mentioned, he didn't even really mention Charlie Kirk, he was talking about the administration, that got so much pushback from viewers, from people like Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
It told me that even though Americans maybe cannot sort of conceptualize of the nitty-gritty of tech policy, when they see this in front of them, they seem to be very much on the side of put it all out there and let me see.
I absolutely. I think that's very true. I think that the response to the Jimmy Kimmel action was fairly universal. I think, again, as you noted, Ted Cruz came out against it. Rand Paul did. I think there were a few Republican members of the House of Representatives who did quite vocally. And I think that it's very important to do it because, again, it shouldn't be a partisan issue. It's a civil liberties issue. And I think it's important to keep it framed in that way.
And yet at the same time, we have seen now a few of these instances where the Trump administration is asking for companies to take down content. And we should say in this Facebook one, that was initially identified by Laura Loomer. And it does make me wonder where you see some of this going, because when we think about the world of online, there are so many different constituencies that are being satisfied here. It is not just the Rand Pauls and Ted Cruzes who want to talk about the First Amendment, but also the far right, which has a lot of sway with the administration. That's what I don't know how to parse. And when I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are the next steps here? Is the administration just going to do what the Loomers of the world ask?
Well, we've seen, unfortunately, quite a bit of doing what the Loomers of the world ask, right? We've seen a number of firings because of lists made by Loomer. We've seen a number of actions taken, personnel decisions made in response to Loomer. and you're correct. She did make a list of groups that she found upsetting, which again, God knows what criteria went into that. So this speaks to the transparency piece. There's very little trust. One thing that the platforms could do immediately is to just begin those transparency disclosures themselves, right? They don't have to wait for legislation to pass, transparency or otherwise. They could just say, we are going to begin to make clear what these requests have been. Will they do that? I don't know, because unfortunately, you have seen the platforms really capitulate in some unexpected ways to what they seem to see as political wind shifting, but also you have seen them really want to demonstrate a willingness to comply with the preferences of the administration. So you've seen them send a few letters of apology. Very, very, if you read between the lines, they're saying, we received some inbound pressure from the Biden administration and we never caved, which is, Jim Jordan frames this as, oh, the Biden administration was censorious and terrible. The Biden censorship regime was evil. What the platforms are actually saying, particularly YouTube, was they made these requests of us and we continued to do what we wanted to do anyway. So it sort of undermines this theory of mass censorship, but it is what it is. They get their political win from it because people don't read it that carefully. The platforms, YouTube then, or Google, I should say perhaps, then did go and settle a lawsuit a couple days later, right? Or YouTube, I think, settled the lawsuit, which had been administratively stayed, but they went and they settled, I think, for about $25 million, making a donation to this ballroom that the president is building. We have seen Meta also similarly make a donation to a presidential library. These are unprecedented capitulations, right? You did not see that sort of action happening under the Biden administration. You didn't see it happening under Obama. You didn't see it happening in any prior administration that I can recall. So when I say that it would be nice to see the platforms show a spine and just begin to do transparency disclosures, I also am fearful that they have decided that would be something that the administration would see as antagonistic, and so they won't make that decision.
Yeah, maybe having faith in them is, I don't know, a little optimistic right now?
It's disappointing because I think that they really were committed to transparency and had really made very, very significant steps in that direction for a period of several years, actually, including throughout the first Trump administration. They were really releasing some very interesting data sets, right? When there was foreign interference on the platform, they would release those data sets transparently. When other governments make takedown requests, they will occasionally disclose those government takedown requests. So there's no reason why they can't do that with U.S. government takedown requests as well.
Renee DiResta, I appreciate you coming on and talking with me about this.
Thanks for having me.
Renee DiResta is an associate research professor at Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy, and she's a contributing editor at Lawfare. All right, that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell and Patrick Fort. Paige Osborne is the senior supervising producer for What Next and What Next TBD, and Mia Lobel is the executive producer here at Slate. TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And if you like what you heard, the number one way to support our independent journalism is to join Slate Plus. You get all your great Slate podcasts ad-free, including this one, and access to exclusive bonus content. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. All right, we'll be back with more episodes next week. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.
Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.
calling all Virginia residents. Level up your career with a local school that's getting national recognition. Earn your doctorate in business with the #1 private university in Virginia, ranked by U.S. News and World Report. Marymount University Online, a quality DBA designed for working professionals. Visit our website for more information at online.marymount.edu. Again, that's online.marymount.edu.